Hello, everyone. It's 12:30. We are kicking off our afternoon sessions. We are really grateful for our presenters this afternoon. We have Dr. Dylan Ruediger and Dr. Claire Baytas. So I'll give a short bio. Dr. Dylan is a program manager for research enterprise at Ithaka, where he leads projects designed to help universities, funders, lawmakers, and scholars develop evidence-based responses to technological, cultural, and political changes that shape the production and circulation of scholarly knowledge. Prior to joining Ithaka, Dylan coordinated a national initiative to better align doctoral education with changing professional opportunities within and beyond the academy at the American Historical Association. We welcome Dylan. Thank you, Dylan. And Dr. Claire is an analyst on the library, scholarly communications, and museums team at the Ithaka. I always forget to say the S plus R. I don't know how to say it, so I'm just going to leave it. Before joining Ithaka, Claire completed a PhD in comparative literature at the University of Illinois, where she taught undergraduate courses and conducted research in literary and film criticism, cultural memory studies, and digital humanities. We welcome Claire. Thank you both. Take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, Anu, for having us. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'll start by sharing my screen. Here it is. Okay. All right. So feel free to let me know if for some reason you cannot see it or cannot hear me. Otherwise,
It's
assuming
working.
yes.
Yep.
All right. Great. So we are going to talk a little today about trends and challenges in generative AI adoption in higher ed, with some comments, of course, specifically directed towards libraries. So I'll go briefly through an introduction because Anu just gave us a wonderful introduction, actually. But my name is Claire Baytas. I'm an analyst at SNR, and I'm here with Dylan Ruediger, who's program manager of the research enterprise. Just a few words about SNR for those of you who may not have heard of it. So Ithaka SNR is a not-for-profit. It's a research organization that's part of a larger organization, Ithaka, that includes JSTOR, one of the earliest databases of digitized journal articles, which I assume many or most of you here are familiar with. So on the S of R side of things, we conduct large-scale applied research projects to help academic and cultural institutions navigate change, with a focus on the intersection of information practices and technology. Most of our research is funded through grants, but we do some fee-for-service work as well. So briefly, our agenda for today. I'll start off by talking a little bit about current trends and possible futures for Gen AI in higher education based on what we've been seeing in our work at SNR. I'll also be saying a little bit about the cohort project that we just launched this fall that's focused on generative AI at universities. Then I'm going to turn it over to Dylan, who's going to say a little bit about implications and strategies for academic libraries specifically. And we aim to end with time for discussion or questions from all of you. All right, so starting off with the broader picture. So first, some general comments on broader impacts. So universities have been aware of AI and how it could affect things for a while, but last year, the release of ChatGPT caught universities, and I think all of us, a little bit off guard and made this subject a big urgent priority. It has the potential to transform every aspect of the university, libraries included, and other aspects too. And so here we have a few just of our main areas of impact. The first column being focused on teaching and learning, the questions of how and when to teach with or without AI, how we need to reevaluate the roles of activities generative AI can assist students with, like writing, how to deal with the academic integrity issues, which were huge at the beginning, may have gone down a little bit in the conversation at this point, but still an issue. Second column here about AI's potential impacts on research. It has the potential to accelerate the research process in many ways or enhance it in many ways, but also raises significant ethical concerns that could be surrounding privacy, research integrity, algorithmic bias. Finally, on staff. So generative AI has the potential to make many tasks more efficient, but may also reshape current staffing units, change their roles. So some of the trends that we've been seeing across the last few months in universities. First, the focus on students and the teaching and learning issues. Since the beginning, even in research-intensive institutions we've been in conversation with and following, the teaching and learning issues really took precedence. More recently, generative AI's implications for the research process are starting to attract more attention, but that's really more recently. And there's the question of authority, policy, guidelines. So universities, especially big R1s, are publishing guidelines, especially coming from teaching and learning and related to teaching and learning. But actual firm policies, enforcement, usually not coming from the universities, at least not at the higher level. Often the individual instructors and their syllabi are sort of the ultimate policy for students and teachers, and then in research, publishers. Also, we're seeing an increasing number of policies coming from universities related to data privacy, and some related to academic integrity as well. Things like universities incorporating generative AI related language into their student code. The final thing I'm going to say here is that we've been seeing this a lot, especially in the universities' assessments of their campuses, that the amount that generative AI is being used is rising, and there's a general, if not always excitement, at least willingness and acceptance that this is going to be a part of teaching and research moving forward. But that doesn't mean the concerns have diminished. At the same time, there's still really high level of concerns about misinformation, privacy, academic integrity, and that really seems to be coming across the whole academic community, even including students. So here, moving a little bit towards the future and speculating what might be coming next with generative AI in higher ed. So first, the volatility. The technology is changing and spreading. It's making it hard for policy and sustainable financial models to keep up. Now, universities are making and are probably going to be continuing to make calls about or the big decisions about generative AI, but in a very complex, ever-changing environment. We're already seeing institutions putting a lot of resources towards trying to raise the AI literacy levels of their communities, making sure folks are aware of AI's strengths and weaknesses, and anticipate this will continue as well. Finally, the customized platforms. We also anticipate universities will continue experimenting with building custom internal AI platforms for their specific communities. We're already seeing a few examples of this. You may have seen the University of Michigan launching their own custom AI platform at the beginning of fall semester. And one big motivation for the schools we've seen who have done this so far is to manage data security risks. A few more future-oriented reflections and just questions we're asking ourselves, kind of related to a lot of the hype we've seen about generative AI across the past year. So first on vendors. At the end of last academic school year, we were seeing data coming out that ChatGPT use had went down a bit. And then some data came out at the beginning of the year saying that the usage might have gone up, suggesting that maybe the educational market will be a bigger influence on the vendors of these AI products than we might have thought initially. Next, the question of the competition for market share eventually moving towards profit seeking. So right now, as many of you are probably aware, with many generative AI tools, at least a basic version is often free. because companies are still competing for market share, but at some point when they start moving towards making a profit, this could change. Hard to predict right now, but this could be an issue to look at when we want to discuss how can we, in thinking about how we can provide equitable access to these tools moving forward, especially at universities. And universities are trying to make plans to integrate these technologies into their service offerings, as we just mentioned with the custom AI platforms, but they may not have a clear sense of what it will eventually cost, making it hard to kind of plan this for the future. And finally, the limits of generative AI. Definitely the conversation is already starting about this. There has been a lot of hype about what generative AI can do, also people questioning what it can't do, asking questions like, what's the difference? What does it mean when we generate new text? Is it necessarily new thoughts or ideas? And how do we understand that difference? So here I'm going to transition to talking briefly about our project that we're doing at SNR. So starting this fall, when we launched the project, we have started working with this cohort of 19 universities. We're all interested in figuring out how to best adopt, use, make policy for AI to best serve their students, their teachers, their staff. With the cohort, we've been looking at the AI tools and technologies that are going to affect teaching, learning, and research. And ultimately, we're working towards strategizing with them, implementing policy and other programs to make sure that all of their campuses are ready to harness this technology in the longer term. It's a 2-year project, so there are a variety of different components, which we can definitely take more questions about in the Q&A if you're interested to learn more about it. You can also see more about it on Ithaka's SNR's website, on our blog especially, but just a few of the main activities that I'll highlight here. So first, the iterative research component that we've been working on day to day to keep everyone up to date on what's going on with generative AI in higher ed, best practices, policies, services. The qualitative inquiry portion into emerging norms, practices, and support needs. So we'll be doing interviews, the cohorts will all be doing interviews on campus, gathering a lot of data about what's going on the ground from an instructor's point of view with generative AI. And a final main component is the consulting and co-learning to develop responsive policies and resources. So between us and the cohort, we're trying to work to help them figure out the best way to respond. They're also consulting with each other and sharing ideas, which is one of the benefits of being a part of the project. So this slide is just a snapshot of all the schools that are participating, just to show that we have a variety of different types of institutions, some big R1s, some smaller schools. We also have a handful of schools from Canada, and the rest are in the US. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dylan, who's going to say a bit more directed towards libraries.
Thanks, Claire. That was a pretty good overview, I hope, of what we're learning about the project so far. We've spent essentially this entire year having conversations with, at this point, folks from probably 50 or 60 different universities and lots of different kinds of people at those institutions. Librarians, people from centers in teaching and learning or writing centers, vice provosts for research, student success and student affairs personnel, IT. It really runs the gamut, and all those groups are participating in our project. But given that this is a conference of librarians, I wanted to say just a couple of things that we're observing and thinking about specifically in library contexts. Obviously, libraries are very important in shaping how universities are responding to generative AI, and they're also likely to themselves be shaped by the technological transformations that we are witnessing. As Claire alluded to, surveys of faculty and students really show that there's a pretty broad consensus around the risks of generative AI. The most common of these that we see coming up over and over again have to do with the potential of these kinds of technologies to accelerate and exacerbate the spread of misinformation and disinformation within and way beyond the academy. and also the temptation that they provide to kind of cut corners on issues of academic integrity, whether that's student assignments or researchers conducting their own conduct. And both students and faculty seem to think of these as like two core issues. I think what's important today is that both of these are places where libraries are really well positioned to lead. And they're really crucial ethical challenges that will benefit a lot by having librarians actively engaged. This is, so Claire, can you go to the next slide, please? So as I mentioned, libraries are, in addition to being well positioned to lead on these kind of topics, libraries are also going to be facing their own challenges and opportunities related to generative AI. And I just wanted to say a few words about how AI may play out specifically in library contexts. And I'd love to hear if this matches your experience, if we have time. So you can see here on this table a non-exhaustive list of not only applications of technology, but the types of units within libraries that may be affected by those kind of applications, as well as some challenges and opportunities that are associated with them. I'm not going to read the slides. I'm hoping you all have access to them after this is over. But as you can see, they're pretty broad and they're spread across many, if not all, of the major units that many libraries are commonly organized into. Next slide, please. The kind of final thought that I want to close with is that the power of this technology is on such a scale that nobody or no individual organization are really going to be able to manage and navigate it on their own. And that's why it's really important for us to be having gatherings like the one we're having today that are really about trying to collectively understand and collaborate around the integrating this technology into higher education and ways of knowing. Our cohort project that we're doing is one other application or instance of how that might work. But this is really a collaborative problem that's going to require a lot of working together. Next slide, please, Claire. I wanted to just close by focusing on again, a non-exhaustive list of strategies that we are either already seeing libraries take around generative AI, in this sense, incorporating it into their own internal processes and workflows, or that we anticipate will likely come to pass. And once again, we've got some lists, non-exhaustive, but indicative of what the potential upside and the potential risks involved in each of these strategic responses might be. And I'd be happy to answer any questions about them either in a moment or offline. We're always interested in talking to folks. So if you got questions that don't get answered today, please reach out to us. So I think at this point, those are the end of our prepared remarks. It looks like we have maybe 12 minutes or so for questions. And we'd love to hear what other people are thinking about. So I see a question from Kathleen Barrell about security risks for generative AI on campus. They are pretty considerable, and they come from a lot of different directions. There are intellectual property issues. There are personally identifiable information issues that both are intersecting with this technology in various ways. Perhaps the best way to think about it is in the context of the kind of sandboxed off tools that we're starting to see universities build. These are designed explicitly to be cut off from the rest of the tool, like of ChatGPT or whatnot, and to be walled off from communities other than those associated with the university. And the reason, among the reasons that universities are starting to build these out is because they want a space where researchers can put sensitive data without exposing it to being either part of the training set for the future of ChatGPT, or exposing it to publication and other kinds of use. It allows students a space to do the very similar thing. And so I think that's most likely how we're going to see universities responding to this, is try to find ways to create sandbox environments that limit the risks around security and privacy.
And I see we have another question. Well, first I'll just say I went back to the application slides. There's a request in the Q&A to do so. So if that person or anyone else has questions about this slide, I put it up so you can take a look. Then we have another question from Laura, which says, most libraries lack the in-house expertise to create their own AI tools. Do you there it is. Do you expect library vendors to incorporate this technology? If so, on what timeline? I'll start off just by saying that a lot of the custom, or pretty much all of the custom AI platforms that we've seen universities create so far, and this is just a few universities at this point, by the way, that we're aware of. There may be more that haven't publicized it, are doing that with Microsoft. With Microsoft Azure's tool to get the OpenAI GPT models. And some are even presenting this as a partnership with Microsoft. I don't really know how that, maybe Dylan, you have some guesses on how that's working in the background. But in terms of the timeline for library vendors, we're already seeing a lot of vendors in this space trying to incorporate AI tools. At what rate that will come into university is hard to say at this point, but it's
Although,
go ahead, Dylan.
I don't think it will be very long. The major publishers in particular, Elsevier, Springer Nature, those kind of folks have either already begun piloting or have announced that they will soon make available tools that are based on generative AI that are designed to allow new kinds of search and discovery for their databases. JSTOR is also doing something very similar, and I think that's going to happen pretty quickly. I would be surprised by summer if most of those tools aren't out on the market. Some of the other applications may take a little longer, but the discovery space is one of the places where I think we'll see change very quickly.
I'll read out the next question we have here. Do librarians really have the ability to evaluate the quality of AI-generated texts, images, and audio? There are numerous examples of human-manipulated data, images, etc., that have led to retractions that went undetected for long periods of time. With AI being able to generate complex items/materials, how are we supposed to have this expertise? I don't know if anybody has the perfect expertise, but I think, Dylan, feel free to follow up on this if you see it differently. I feel like more of it that we need to have is awareness that it could be human manipulated, and knowing when to try and be wary of that and check for it how we can without necessarily positioning librarians or anyone as able to see through the technology. I don't know if Dylan, you have any further thoughts on that. But
just to build up on that last thought of yours, I think this is one of the main reasons why a response to generative AI really needs to be collaborative, and it needs to cross every facet of the university. It is unreasonable to expect librarians to develop and then redevelop evolving expertise on this topic. But if we start thinking about ways that publishers, libraries, departments or disciplines, scholarly societies, funders can spread that responsibility out, we may start to get closer to having the infrastructure to at least contain the problems that are going to come up, that are already starting to surface around using generative AI for images and other purposes. So I don't think the burden should fall on librarians to be primarily responsible for this. I think it needs to be spread out.
Yeah, I think it would be unrealistic for it to fall only on librarians. The next question is, are you exploring the equity issues surrounding access to vastly improved but for pay-only platforms such as ChatGPT 3.5 plus 4.0? Do you want to take that one,
Sure,
Dylan?
yeah. Absolutely, this is definitely on our radar. And I think it's going to just become a bigger problem over time. Right now, the difference between 3.5 and 4, while pretty significant, is not an absolute gulf between the two tools. And so people that only have access to the free tool are disadvantaged, but not in a way that is super terribly disturbing. But I think what we're likely to see is that 3.5 may remain free for quite some time when they're now giving paid access to 7.5 or 8 or 10. We may also see situations where so like that's one way in which individuals might find that they have different levels of access. And given what we know about the socioeconomics of college students, for example, that's going to potentially be a very significant problem. It also seems likely to me that we could see a situation where different kinds of institutions have different levels of access, because as enterprise versions of these things become more and more available, the same thing will play out between well-resourced institutions and less resourced institutions who are not going to be able to afford to pay for these things. Most of what we've seen out of the digital era is exacerbation of inequities. I'm pretty skeptical this will be different from that pattern.
Looks like we've got one more question at the moment. I appreciate this one. Maybe would be also one for that you might want to take, Dylan. I appreciate the slide about applications for libraries, as well as your comment about both the benefits for staff, the greater efficiency, and concerns, potential staff loss and great change management challenges. Do you have any advice to share on how to approach this? Examples of libraries that have incorporated generative AI, how successful they've been?
Sure. I'm not going to be able to do this question justice in the 3 minutes that we have. So Nicholas, perhaps we could continue this conversation offline. I will say that there definitely are libraries that are emerging as leaders of this, but the models are still pretty nascent. So I would anticipate that next spring, maybe next summer, there will be quite a few resources available coming from libraries that are discussing in detail what they're doing to adapt. But I think right now it's still a little early. Most of higher ed spent last semester just trying to keep up and stay somewhat with the current. And it's really this fall that we're seeing universities start to actually make deliberate and kind of proactive decision making. And it's going to take a little while to see what works, what doesn't work. And so I would say keep your eye out down the line. Those are the kind of things that Ithaka SNR will definitely be paying attention to. So you could probably follow a lot of those on our blog.
Oh, yeah, great questions. Thank you. I don't think we're going to have time to answer the last one about student input, but I'll say briefly that we've tracked a lot of university assessments, and they have often sought student input. You can look at ones done by UVA or Michigan and see how their students responded to generative AI. Yeah, I think we should conclude there to not get everyone off schedule, but thank you all so much.
Thank
Yeah.
you.